In our motion capture class that I am currently teaching at Lesley University, we are covering some of the basics of Motion Builder as our motion capture data application. So I wanted to make a first video here, which is an introduction to Motion Builder and what we covered in the first class. So what we did in there was we went to the tutorial section and pulled one of the characters from here into the scene. So I'm going to grab the gremlin and drag and drop it into the scene, and then I get this drop menu that says FBX open, and I'll just say all takes. So then I have my character in the scene. Here again, I'm also using Maya navigation, which is Alt plus the 3 mouse buttons: left to orbit, middle to track, and right to dolly. Now, Motion Builder by default has its own navigation, and in order to change that, we go up to the settings menu and choose interaction mode. And in the interaction mode, I change it to Maya for Motion Builder. Now, the other primary things that we covered that day relate to how we manipulate the rig. And the most important thing here is to be aware of what posing mode we're in. By default, we are in body part. So if I select a body part such as an arm or a hand and I switch to my move tool, we see that I'm affecting only that body part. If I try to move it beyond its stretch point, it doesn't move. That's body part mode. If I switch to full body mode and then move that body part, we see that the entire body tries to compensate, hence the name full body mode. So we can see how full body mode can be very beneficial in posing, because if we need the character to put their arms down, we can start to put the arm down and the rest of the body will compensate for it. But the one thing we have to keep in mind here when we are working in full body mode is when we set a key by using the key button down here in the key controls. If we're in full body mode, when we set a key, we're going to set it on every body part because we're in full body mode. And I'll do that. If I hit the key button, we see a keyframe has been created right here at frame 0. And if I select any other body part, we see that there's still a key there. So I'm going to undo that. Now, if I am in body part mode here instead, and I select that same hand, and then I hit the key button, we see that there is a key there on that frame. I was actually not on frame 0, I was on frame 2. There's a key for that body part, and any body part in that sequence would be keyed also. So there's the elbow also has a key, the shoulder has a key, but watch what happens when I leave that body part. So now I go to the chest, and now there are no keys here. So body part mode will only key the body part when we hit the key button. Again, that's very important to know, because when we start keying in Motion Builder, we want to think about whether we're setting keys on all the body parts or just one body part. If we're doing traditional keyframing, which is not what we typically use Motion Builder for, although as I mentioned in class, it's very powerful for just doing straight keyframe biped animation, we typically use it for motion capture. But understanding the keying methodologies for Motion Builder is important even if you're working with motion capture data. So going back to traditional keyframing, if we are setting our extreme keys, meaning where our primary poses for this character, then we're probably going to want to pose or key in full body mode so that we set keys on all the body parts. But then when we move to in-betweens and breakdown keys, then we might want to switch to body part mode so that we're only setting keys on the body part that we're making those minor adjustments to. The other thing that we covered that day in class that I just want to put into this video as reference is working with the pin tools here. So the pin tools will allow me to pin down any body part. And if you remember how, as we discussed in class, how Motion Builder works, is that it's not like a traditional rig system where we have to switch IK and FK on and off. It is what I like to refer to as organic. And by that I mean if I want to work in IK, so I'm going to grab the hand, we see that the body moves in IK. The hand is affecting its parents. But if I want to work in FK, I can just select the parent object, switch to the rotate tool, and now I'm working in FK. So there's no switch there, which is kind of nice. Now the pins work the same way. I can pin down a body part either in translate, rotate, or both, and these can be turned on and off on the fly. So if I want to, for instance, pin the hand in place, I can select the hand and then pin its translate and its rotate. And now if I grab something like the center of mass and move it, oops, actually, the other thing we mentioned, very important here, if we want to work with the pinning tools, we need to make sure we're in full body mode. I was in body part mode, and you see that that hand didn't stay pinned in place. But if I switch to full body mode and then move the center of mass, now that hand stays in place. And I can just pose the character, set my keys, move down the timeline, and if I want to turn the pins off, I can just turn them off and pose the character, and Motion Builder will remember that. So it remembers the pose, whether you've created that pose with pins or not, it just remembers the pose. That's one of the idiosyncrasies to the human IK system that we don't typically have in a traditional rig. So some other interesting things we can do with the pins, if I select the head, now with the head, I don't know if there would be a time where I would ever pin both the translate and rotate, as we see what that gives me here. The head sort of stays in place. But we might pin translate and not rotate. And now if I grab the center of mass, we see the head sort of stays upright, like it's looking at something. The eyes are locked on to something specific. So there are times where we might use one or the other. On the legs and the hands, we typically, if we want to plant the hand against the wall or on a prop, then we would use both translate and rotate pins. And the legs, we can see by default, are both translate and rotate pinned, so that when I move the body around, oops, actually I still have the head pinned, so it's not going to go anywhere. All right, let me turn those pins off, and then I'll grab the center of mass. We see the legs stay pinned in place. So those were the primary things that we talked about in class last week, and I just wanted to make a reference video for those. So hopefully that helps in case you have any questions.